Okay, well, you're in beautiful Ohio, beautiful weather. Stephen Burke, who in a few days will give his 113th briefing to the 361 community. Probably more if you go back to all the other things. We're going back to London, but we're in Ohio again. And you've been to Ohio many times. Since the 80s. You've seen the finance industry evolve. You've seen, I'm from a small town in Ohio, Newark. And we've had our problems through the multinational movement. We saw jobs go to China. And there's a certain new kinetic energy that's happening here. But what are your impressions? We've been together a few times, so.
Well, I think the big changes are business is coming back, and it's coming back in a big way. Intel, Ford's talking about bringing a lot of jobs back. I think the approach that the government's taken to make it more attractive to bring jobs back is pretty differentiated and special, and they're marketing it hard, and people are recognizing it. And I think the shift from the coast back to the Midwest is a trend that's going to continue, and I think it's good for this area because of the schools, and it creates jobs for the young people and keeps the talent here. And I think that's one of the things that was a problem. You had talent drain, you had job drain, and now you have it coming back, and I think that makes this area really dynamic. And I think the venture community is on board with it. I think a lot of investments coming back here, and I think that's going to make a big difference for a long time.
Do you remember in 2019 in New York, you
yes, I do.
You were at co-keynote with somebody who was the Lieutenant Governor of Ohio.
Yes, I wish I looked at the agenda before that. It was pretty hard on politicians, not local ones. It was more directed to Washington, and I was really impressed with what Lieutenant Governor and the Governor have been doing, and to make it attractive to bring business back. I think it starts with leadership, and so much of the world is devoid of strong leadership to make good decisions for the long term, not for the next election cycle. And I think what they're doing here is longer term planning, which is really a void in the U.S. right now, and many other countries too.
So March 2020, we were elbow shaking, and because we were with the Lieutenant Governor, and he was telling us that he's going to shut down the major events, and so they were showing that leadership. But you've also met Jobs Ohio, and you've been hearing that story for some time, very unique group. And something rather major happened in my county, which was Intel choosing to come to put 20, maybe up to 100 billion, and that plays to some of that transformation, reshoring that you've been talking about.
Yeah, and in the semiconductor area, it's particularly important because semiconductors are so critical to everything we do today. It used to be phones and computers, and that's a big part of the business still, but now it's cars, it's the EV movement, it's pretty much everything we do is going to be driven by that. And even the retail area, I think there was a 40% increase in robotics last year, and all those things require a lot of chips. And unfortunately, given the geopolitical situation in the world today, bringing back stuff that secures the country's needs is critical, and Intel's taken a big step with that. I think they have to find places to go, and Ohio's been a beneficiary of that so far. So I think that's, they had the plan, and the plan was the right time for the world, what was going on in the world, and so a lot of things are coming together. I think it's very positive for the Midwest area. And I think it's, we're going through a tough time in the country and in the world, but I think this is what you need to do to come out of it well, and I think they're positioned well for the turn. And I don't know if we're going to have a deep recession or even a recession at all, but regardless of what that is, you have to be ready for what's next. And I think they're taking the steps to be ready for what's next. I think that's important. I think we have to do that more around the country too, and around the world with our allies. I think there's a real uncomfortable dynamic with governments around the world and with geopolitics and all these changes going on at once. And we're going to need strong leadership, and we're going to need it from companies, we're going to need it from politicians, and we're going to need it from the population. We all have to realize what we're up against. There's a fight on our hands, and we have to do that together. And I think that's going to take a change in the way we operate as a country, and a change in the mindset of the people to get through what's going to be a challenge. So, but there will be positives coming out of it. We reshore. our economy is much better than the rest of the world is in a lot of ways. And we're very dynamic. We've always been, and we're very adaptable. And I think that's going to allow us to push forward and get through the tough times as it always has. It's the resilience and adaptability of the U.S. economy is one of the hallmarks of it. It's one of the things that keeps us as one of the leaders. And I think it'll push us through even as we have foreign governments or foreign countries really challenging us. Japan in the 80s, China more recently. But sustainability of it is hard. And I think it takes a lot of things. It takes rule of law to be respected. It takes education, so you have a strong population that's knowledgeable and innovation, and that comes from an educated society. And I think the other thing we're missing, and this is one of the key things I've talked about a lot, is we have to be more open to bring immigrants back into the U.S. We have a population issue. Our birth death rates aren't that great. Our fertility rates aren't that high. So we need new talent coming in, and we need that diversity too, because it helps drive us and make us better. So I think that's, while it's kind of cloudy in the short term, I think the long term, the U.S.'s resilience will take us through, and our adaptability will drive it, and our innovation. So as long as we keep our education strong and we don't get too divided as a country, and that's one of the challenges. We have to come together, and we need strong local governments, and we need strong national governments to do that, but we also need corporations to get on board with it and really drive it forward. So I think there's big changes that have come. I think there's bigger changes coming as we move ahead, and I think that's going to be pretty dynamic for the country, and also for the Midwest, because it's going to continue to benefit from the reshoring that we've talked about.
So when you talk such big picture, it reminds me. Many have said Steve Burke for president, but I'll put that aside. We already have another president coming, according to one of our
yes. And I wouldn't get through the vetting anyway. So I think we're pretty sure on that.
But actually, it's an interesting comment. I've known you for a while. I just feel like there's a lack of constructive dialogue and critical thinking that and you've always been a proponent of. You've helped us navigate, starting with through COVID. And you've been with data, which is, and you've even admitted you're always like your worst critic or something. You're so modest. But we've talked about inflation and and how that plays out, and you just talked about that last week. That on I think it was the Nielsen poll or the Gallup poll. It's rising.
It's the number one concern on people's minds, other than poor leadership, unfortunately.
How would you answer the question? What are the things that you're obviously leadership? You've said. Is there anything that you don't think we're missing? Or do you think we're missing something?
I think we are stuck in a short-term election cycle for policy, and we're competing against China, who has very long-term views. They stay in office longer, but they have longer-term views. And I think that's one of the problems. Is there's too much business myopia and government myopia. And it's all about staying in, improving your equity, your stock value, and it's about improving your getting reelected. And I think that after a time comes back to bite you. And I think we have to get longer term and be better planned and plan better and think it through as a country, not by party. And I think if we get past that stuff, we'll continue to be the dominant economy for a long time. And I think that's what we have to do. It's easier said than done, which is why I wouldn't run for anything. I don't think people want that.
I think I could sit here for 5 hours talking to you. You might get tired. I wouldn't get tired of talking to you.
Well, no, this is a great group, and
thank you.
What you've done with the community, the 361 community, is phenomenal, and bringing people in like Jobs Ohio, and that's created the fund that was launched, which is another phenomenal opportunity for new businesses to develop. And I think that is one of the other things that's going to be important for our country. And it was really good in the pandemic that we did see a lot of new businesses started, because when you have those challenging times like we went through with the pandemic, it's those new businesses, those new ideas that drive us forward. And I think that's why, as easy it is to get negative in the short term, there's a lot to be positive about in the longer term, even with all the negatives that we talk about. So I think we have a good future ahead of us if we just, play it the right way and get back to some of the old values that we've had. and better dialogue and start listening instead of just yelling and talking. And we have to protect our children. Another thing in Philadelphia today, and that stuff, we just have to. There's no reason for this to be continuing the way it is, and that's where the leadership's lacking. Too ideologic and not enough practical care about the people. So I think that's not a positive thing to leave it on, but you can edit it.
Thank you.
But thank you. Thanks for everything, Mark. Appreciate it.
Come join our 361 firm community of investors and thought leaders. We have a lot of events created by the community as we collaborate on investments and philanthropic interests. Join us.